Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope the content encourages you and helps you build your faith. Now enjoy the message.
Hebrews 11, 23 through 29. Says it was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. Verse 27, it was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. In verse 29, it was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. 5 times you see in this passage, and by the way, I know we just said we're in the book of Exodus, and I just read you Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 is kind of a snapshot of the life of Moses, the man who leads the children of Israel out of Egypt in slavery into their exodus. But it was 5 moments that are mentioned, and every moment is started by faith. It was by faith. Somebody say, by faith. It was by faith that Moses, okay, so now let's piece this together really quickly. Because Moses' God-called, God-ordained, burning bush purpose given to him was to lead the children of Israel to freedom. Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. Freedom was his mission. Faith was his method. You see that? The calling was to lead him to freedom. The calling was, I have a group of people, they're in slavery. I have heard their cries. That was our first or second message. It was Exodus 2, 23 through 25. God heard, God knew, God remembered, God saw, right? So he saw that these people were in slavery, they were in oppression, they were being beaten down, they were being torn apart, and God says they need freedom. God tells Moses, go lead these people to freedom, and we have the recap of it of Hebrews, that the method that he used to complete the mission of freedom was faith, application. The greatest levels of freedom you are going to experience in your life are going to come by faith. By faith. You want freedom in an area of your life, it's going to come by faith. It happens by faith. So then we ask the question, well then what is faith? Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. So faith is going to take me to freedom. Faith is going to lead me to that place of freedom that I need in my life now. I need free from this. You know what it is in your mind. You know what it is in your heart. I need freedom here. Freedom from these thoughts. Freedom from these actions. Freedom from these eyes. I need freedom. I am hearing faith is going to take me to freedom. I just heard the definition of faith is it is the confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. What did that look like for Moses? Well, the confidence in what he hoped for was freedom. He said, I am headed to freedom. In fact, it tells you that when he had the opportunity to enjoy the luxuries of Pharaoh, what did he choose? Oppression, because he was looking forward to the greater reward. His faith was in something he didn't have, but he knew that God wanted for him. Your freedom that you're longing for comes by faith, and that faith, the initial step of it is recognizing this fact: God wants you free. He wants you free. He does not want you in slavery to sin. He does not want you in slavery to these thoughts. He does not want you in slavery to whatever it is that is plaguing you or attacking you or has enslaved you in your life. He does not want that. In fact, not only does he not want that, but he has taken action to free you from that. So his desire is freedom, and Moses' confidence was in the fact that God wanted him free. Then the last half, for an assurance about what we do not see. For freedom, and Moses, it was that God will take me there. It said he kept following. He was not afraid of what Pharaoh had said because he kept focused on that which was invisible. God wants me free, and God will take me to the place of freedom. Through his providence, through his will, through his grace, through his mercy, through his ability to do the impossible when it seems like nothing else around me is going to work out and going to happen right. God has the ability to place right in the middle of your mess exactly what you need for freedom. Last week, Moses, Pharaoh's house, you get the picture. Refer to last week's message. Okay, so how do we piece all of this together then? And I love the illustrations that we've given. The first three are invisible. The second two are deliverance. But before we get there, we have to understand this by faith. That it's by faith no matter situation. It's by faith no matter circumstance. It's by faith no matter what's happening. It's by faith no matter what is going on in the natural. Our first step to freedom is by faith. My son, the other night, we were having dinner, and I don't know what it is. Guys, let me know if it's the same in your house, but when the temperature hits low 60s, it's like chili season. Isn't that annoying? Right? The women are cheering, and the guys are like, oh, don't bring this up. There's been a fight in my house for a week. It's like every day, what chili can we make? Let's make white bean turkey chili. Let's make tortilla chicken chili. Let's make a traditional chili. And I am so sick of chili already. It's like, it's 65 outside. You eat this, you walk outside and you just sweat. Why are we already talking about chili? Is it not true? It's like this season of October hits and it's like, let's make chili every day. No. Not only do we just make chili one time, but we make these massive portions of chili and then we freeze it just so that we can have extra chili, right? Because everybody wants chili for 3 days for lunch, right? Every man does. Oh, thanks, honey, that you have made 14 gallons of chili and you're freezing it. So when I say I'm hungry one night, you can say, well, I got that turkey bean chili that we got over here. I'm like, what is going on? So I at least beg for a supplement in the meal. I'm like, okay, if we're going to have chili, can we have a really good side? She's like, okay, fine, here's the side. Went to H-E-B and bought those green beans with like a breadcrumb Parmesan crust. Yeah. Let me tell you something. You throw those in the air fryer for 10 minutes, pull them out, they crunch like a French fry, but they're a green bean. Low carb, get at me, right? I mean, unbelievable. So I've got these green beans, and then I've got this chili, and then I've got like these chips, and I've got these crackers, and I got all this stuff, and I'm sitting there at the table, and I looked at my son, and something just wasn't clicking with all of it, you know? So I said to my son, I said, you know what this meal's missing? He said, what, Daddy? And I said, the sauce. And he said, the sauce? And I said, the sauce. Let's make the sauce. Now listen, I'm not from Louisiana, but I spend a lot of time in Louisiana. Some of my best friend lives in Louisiana. I go fishing with him multiple times a year. I've been to Louisiana enough to know that when the occasion calls, you got to make the sauce to dip something in, right? Look, I don't have the sauce like my man Floyd has the sauce, but I can make up for myself when I need the sauce. And it's a Tuesday night, chilly night, and we got chili and crackers, and I'm trying to find something good. So here's the sauce, right? So you get this little dish, and I brought my son over to the fridge, and I got you got to have the mayo. You get the mayo, right? 1 part mayo, 1 part ketchup, just to build the base. And you start whipping that stuff together real quick, and it starts to turn that pink. And then you get your can of Tony Caceres, right? And you start dumping that Tony's in there. And you get that Tony's real good and glistening, and then you stir that up, and so then you got the mayo, you got the ketchup, you got the Tony's, crack a little black pepper in there, crack a little sea salt in there, and then the final touch is some Frank's Red Hot sauce. You just, just a few little drips around till it's like dripping down. Then you mix that up real good, and that is one of many the sauces, okay? So I take this over to the table, and I'm like, Bubby, I got the sauce. And he's all about it at this point. He's like, the sauce, you know. He is me right now. Everything I do, he does in magnified proportions, which I love. So we're sitting at the table, and I took that green bean, and I dipped that crunchy green bean, and I was like, ooh, the sauce. And so my son, he takes that green bean, and he dips it in there, and he goes, the sauce. And so I'm like, man, it's really good, right, Bubby? And he's like, Daddy, it's so good. The sauce is so good. So then he starts taking these crackers, and he starts dipping these crackers in the sauce. And I was like, is that good, son? And he was like, yeah, Daddy, it's the sauce. So then he takes these tortilla chips, and he starts dipping these tortilla chips in the sauce. And I was like, son, is that good too? And he's like, oh, Daddy, the sauce. And then he takes a scoop of his chili, and he dips it in the sauce, and he eats it. And we were like, son, is that good too? And he, the sauce, Daddy, the sauce is so good. And then, I kid you not, takes his spoon straight into the sauce, like he's eating a pudding cup. He's got it on there, and just shaking on it, and we're like, oh. And we're like, son, how was it? And he said, Daddy, the sauce is so good. It's like running out of his mouth, and his nose is running. You know, he's sweating, and he's like, Daddy, I love the sauce. But you know, when you get the right things in the sauce, it goes good on everything. It works in everything. You can put it on everything. And what was bad will taste good. What was good will taste great. And what was great will still be great. When you add your faith to whatever it is you're going through, it's going to make it better. This is where we have to see what Moses is setting up here. That the first part of the thing that he's adding his faith to was really bad. First 3 examples, they're a disaster. I mean, it's absolute chaos. I don't have time to recap it all, but the first 3 places he walks us through, number 1, they're killing the infant babies under Pharaoh's reign. All of the Jewish-born boys are being thrown into the largest river in the world. And yet, by faith, you add a little bit of faith to it. And what does God do? God takes Moses in a basket down a rapid river, caught into Pharaoh's house, and God moves, but that was invisible. You didn't see God moving until God did it. The second example that we have is Moses refused to be Pharaoh's son, right? Another invisible. Moses said, you know what? He is mistreating a Hebrew. I will protect the Hebrew. Moses tries to protect him. He becomes an outcast. Pharaoh wants to kill him. He runs off to Midian. Moses did not know what was going to come about in that moment, but it was by faith. He put some faith into it, and God moved in the midst of that moment. The third example that we talked about was Moses leaving the land. Moses left the land of Egypt. It was by faith that Moses went in, led an exodus, and left. Moses, invisible, did not know where he was going, did not know what he was doing, but by faith, he did it, and God moved. The next 2 that we talk about are the doorpost and the parting of the sea. Here's the difference. The first 3 were invisible. The first 3 were chaos. The first 3 were terrible. The first 3 were oppression. The first 3 were pain. The first 3 were abandonment. The last 2 are deliverance. The last 2 is God saying, I am taking you out of this now, and you will see my manifest presence right before you. And you will see my power work, and you will move into a greater place by seeing me do it. It is the spectrum of faith. It is putting your faith in something that's bad, it's going to make it good. Putting your faith in something that's good, it's going to make it great. Putting your faith in something great, and it's going to take it to a new level of freedom. So let's jump in here. I want to recap just a little bit. And by the way, you have to understand this. You have to leave Egypt to get to Sinai. right? In your life, you're not going to wake up every day in Sinai. Mount Sinai was the place of deliverance where God would make them his people. You're going to wake up there. Some days you wake up in Egypt. And to get from Egypt to Sinai, you have got to walk through some things. In this transition that they're walking through, you're going to see it. But this is just a point from last week. I'll build on it, and then we'll finish this thing off. Hebrews 11:27. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. Exodus 9:1-5 gives us this story. It's go back to Pharaoh. God is calling Moses. He says, Moses, go back to Pharaoh. The Lord commanded Moses. Tell him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so they can worship me. Verse 2. If you continue to hold them and refuse to let them go, the hand of the Lord will strike all your livestock. Catch this now. Moses is breathing a threat right into the face of Pharaoh. He's saying, Pharaoh, let my people go, and if not, all your sons are dying, all your gods are executed, all your livestock's dying. He says, your Lord will strike all your livestock, your horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats with a deadly plague. But the Lord will again make a distinction between the livestock of the Israelites and that of the Egyptians. Not a single one of Israel's animals will die. The Lord has already set the time for the plague to begin. He has declared that he will strike the land tomorrow. So we talked about this point last week, and we realized that Moses ran away to Midian, and God met Moses in Midian, and he called him back to Egypt to lead an exodus. And we said sometimes God will call you back to what you've ran from so that you can lead an exodus out of it for other people. Sometimes you may run from something, and you may get free from something, and you may be away from something, and God may say to you, you know what? I want you back in the place that you ran from so that I can use you to do a greater work, because your ministry may be greater in that place of Egypt than it is running away from it over here. Talk about prison ministry. Maybe you got out of prison and you ran from prison as fast as you can, and now God is saying to you, I want you to go back to prison, but this time I want you to go there with a mission. And I want you to lead an exodus out of that prison. I want you to set men free inside of that prison. I want you to go in there and do a work. Maybe you went through something in your marriage, and man, it was just a difficult time, and it was something that you guys have gotten through and you've ran from, and now God is calling you back to that place of ministering to couples that need reconciliation. The very place that you ran from, God's calling you back to lead an exodus out of, right? So we talked about that, and I was wanting to go here, but didn't have time. So with that in mind, let me take you here, okay? Because we have to understand something. Throw up real quick Hebrews 11:27. Let's see it. You got it? Hebrews 11:27. Thank you. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt. If I'm you, I'm circling this in my Bible. Not fearing the king's anger, okay? It was by faith that he left, and he left with no fear. He wasn't afraid of the king's anger. Let me read to you Exodus 2, verse 15, because that was the second time that Moses left. The first time that Moses left, when he had killed the Egyptian trying to protect a Hebrew and everyone turned against him, the first time is in Exodus 2, verse 15. It says, and sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled. The Hebrew word for fled is ran for his life. Moses ran for his life from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. Okay, you have two exits. First exit, Exodus chapter 2, he's in fear and he's running for his life. He's horrified. The second exit, Exodus 9, God calls him back to, and he goes back to the place that he ran from in fear. And this time, God asks him to breathe threats into the face of the man that wanted to kill him in the first place. To say, you will let my people go, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. And you'll let them go, and if you don't, all of your livestock, all of your animals, all of your gods, and all of your firstborn, they're dead. Deal with that. Show us the exit. What changed? From first exit to second exit. Now, my initial thought was calling. Oh, God placed a calling on him. Moses had already been called. He took action against the Hebrew when he was called. He's already been called to lead the Exodus. Then he killed somebody and ran from it. What changed? I love this. The town of Midian was outside of Egypt. It was what was called a wilderness town, right? It had none of the amenities of Egypt. It wasn't allowed to share anything from Egypt. It didn't have city water. It didn't have city electricity. They weren't allowed to go into Egypt to the supermarket. It was an outskirts town and a place where you only fended for yourself and raised your livestock. Moses spent 40 years there. He spent 40 years in the wilderness in, keyword, preparation. Moses was in a time of preparation in Midian. God is crafting him. God is preparing him. God has taken away everything that he thought that he needed and placed him in a town in the wilderness where his own people rejected him. And now he's sitting here in isolation, raising cattle, wondering, what on earth could God want to do with me now? Maybe you're there. Maybe you're in a place where you're saying, well, I was in, often, too many times, we place all of the emphasis on our preparation in the palace. We look at Moses and we look at ourselves and we say, the palace is the place where most of my preparation is going to happen. We can call it Bible college. We can call it church. We can call it Sunday school. We can call it Bible study. We can call it whatever we want. But we place such an emphasis on God's preparation for me is going to happen in the formal, highest, greatest setting, which would have been the palace. And Moses is running from the palace for his life, and he lands in Midian. Yet the greatest work that God is going to use him to do is being prepared for him in the place of his greatest rejection and pain. Do you realize that some of the most difficult times that you have gone through are some of the greatest areas of preparation to help you lead an exodus in your life? I will tell you, some of the greatest preparation that I have had for ministry was not in New Testament theology and Bible college. It was in places of pain. It was in places of rejection. It was in places of being told no. It was in trying to get a building and being told, no, you're not going to have it, and then someone else coming to me saying, find some other place to go start a church. You're not going to find any favor in Huntsville. This is not the place where God wants you, and everything. Those are the things that crafted me for ministry, and I am putting too much emphasis on the palace, not realizing that Midian is the place of preparation. God is preparing some of you. He already has been preparing some of you. You may have just missed it because you may be sitting in Midian thinking, the greatest days of my life are gone because I'm no longer in the palace. I'm no longer in that place of preparation. Now I'm having to walk through these trials. Now I'm having to walk through these difficulties. Maybe you lost a child, and losing that child was such a place of pain, and it was such a place of isolation. You didn't tell anybody because you didn't want to have to recap what had happened in those moments, but yet God is going to take those moments, and He's going to connect you with someone who just experienced the same thing, and God is going to say to you that your greatest area of ministry in this person's life is this place of pain if you'll just realize that I've been preparing you for it. Who better to lead a nation of people through the wilderness than a man who spent 40 years there? Than a man who has spent 40 years in that isolation, being rejected from those he thought he was supposed to lead. You get that, right? Acts 7:24-25 it says Moses, when he took action against the Egyptian, he thought the people of Israel would rally behind him, but they were the ones that turned on him and said, what, are you going to kill us too? He ran off. The very people he was trying to protect, the very people he was trying to help, they put him in isolation. They put him in Midian, and yet God is using Midian. Don't take Midian for granted in your life. Don't take for granted the challenges you're walking through now. Don't take for granted the difficulties you may be facing right now, because God has the ability to take those places of pain and those places of difficulty and those places of challenge and use them as places of ministry, of places of incredible impact. You guys who have been through 30, 40 years of marriage, that's why we're telling you we need you to be marriage mentors. You get that right? We're begging, we need you to be marriage mentors. God's calling you. Take this as a word from the Lord right now. 30, 40-year marriages. We need you to be a marriage mentor. Why? Because we got a 2-year marriage that is facing something that you've walked through. Use your Midian. Use your time there. Use your time in those challenges. Use your time in those difficulties so you can say, man, I wanted to kill them 28 years ago, and now we've made it 30 years. It's great. Here's what we did. That's your Midian. That's your work. That's what God has called you to. Okay, so now, believe it or not, there's some new points to this message, okay? So we get there. We found it. We see it. It makes total sense now with Moses. I love that part of Moses' story, that the 40 years he spent in isolation were the greatest preparation for the work that God wanted him to do. All right, let's wrap this up. This is so good. Man, this is so good. Hebrews 11:28. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. What they are referring to is there was a series of plagues that then happened, okay? So Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, you let these people go, and Pharaoh says no, and Moses says, okay, God said that this plague will happen. Your water will turn to blood. There'll be locusts everywhere, and all of these hailstorms will come, and he tells him, he walks through all of these plagues, right? And Pharaoh's like, okay, go. No, I want you to stay. Okay, go. No, I want you to stay. And then it reaches this point, the final plague. We just read about it a few moments ago, where God tells Moses, go tell him, I'm going to wipe out everything, I'm going to kill everything if you don't let these people go. Moses goes back to the children of Israel, and he tells them, hey, God is going to, in the final plague before the Exodus, he is going to wipe out, the angel of death will come and he'll wipe out every firstborn child, animal, and the gods, he'll execute judgment on the gods. And he says, he institutes the Passover. It's a Jewish festival that's still celebrated today in the spring. And he says, here is the Passover. I want you to take a lamb without blemish. I want you to sacrifice it. And I want you to take that blood, and I want you to mark your doorpost with it, and the angel of death will pass over you. Exodus 12:12-13 says, on that night I will pass through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn son and firstborn male animal in the land of Egypt. I will execute judgment on all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord, but the blood. Nothing but the blood. Only the blood on your doorposts will serve as a sign, marking the houses where you are staying. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. This plague of death will not touch you when I strike the land of Egypt. Obviously, you get the Christology. You get the picture of this being a foreshadowing of what Jesus is going to do for us. But let's do something really quick, really fun. 60 seconds. You want to do this? It's going to be really fun. Yeah. You in? You in? Still with me? Still awake? Nudge your husband, wake him up. We there? Okay. Let's all be Jews for a minute, okay? Let's all be Jews. Shalom. Shalom. Shalom alaikum. Let's be Jews. Here we go. Now, we're not just Jews, we're Jews in Egypt. Right? So we're all Jews, and we're Jews in Egypt right now. And we've been battling for our own freedom, and we've been oppressed, and we've been slaves, and we've been beaten up, torn up, chewed up, spit out. God's done 8 different plagues beforehand, and now Moses comes to us and he says, people, listen, tonight's the night. Tonight is the night. It's the last plague. Pack your bags, because tomorrow we're heading out of Egypt. Here's what God's going to do. The angel of death is going to sweep across the land of Egypt, and he's going to kill every firstborn child of the Egyptians. He's going to wipe out their animals, and he's going to execute their gods. So go home, pack, get a lamb. Make sure he has no spots. We're not talking about Dalmatians here. Get you a good lamb. No markings on it. I want you to kill it. I want you to sacrifice it. And I want you to take that blood and I want you to wipe your doorpost. I'm a Jewish man. I'm going home and I'm like, whoa, that's intense. Like, we leave tomorrow. Honey, pack the bags. I got to find a lamb. And I go and I find this lamb and I kill the lamb and I take the blood and I mark it on the doorpost and I'm like, oh man, that's probably not enough. I need to make sure he sees this, so it doesn't get real bad around here. So I marked the doorpost, right? And then I want you to think about this. Be Jews with me for a second. You go into your house. I'm picking up my Zion, my firstborn. I sit down in a chair and I begin rocking her to sleep. Anna's packing the bags. And I'm thinking, this is the night. This is the night it all goes down. I hope that this is right. I hope this is true. I don't know about you, but I'm not sleeping. I'm staying up. And she begins to doze off, and Anna's sitting with me, and we're just waiting, and we're listening. And we see the sun beginning to set, and night begins to set in, and we're like, this is the moment. This is when it happens. And you begin to hear chaos from miles and miles away as people's children are dying in their homes. And you hear the chaos of these animals and people are rushing out of their homes. And I'm still sitting there and I'm just rocking my firstborn. And I'm thinking to myself, the only protection that I have in this moment is the blood that I shed. And the blood that I placed on a doorpost. Let the blood protect me. Let the blood keep me safe. Let the blood watch over me. And then morning begins to settle in, and I give Zion a little shake, and I see her little eyes open up, and I see that life is still there, and I recognize that now is the moment. The morning has set in. The angel of death has come. The bags are packed. We made it by protection in the blood, and the blood alone. I am able to take the journey of freedom. Yeah, right? Now we catch it, that it was the blood that sets us free. It's the blood that starts the journey to freedom. It's the same with us now. 1 Peter 1, 18 through 19 says, for you know that God paid a ransom to save you from the empty life you inherited from your ancestors. And it was not paid with mere gold, silver, or with things that lose their value. Verse 19, it was the precious blood of Christ, the sinless, spotless Lamb of God. The only protection that we have, the only safety that we have, the only covering that we have that allows us to walk into freedom is the precious blood of the Lamb. The precious blood of Jesus that cleansed us, that welcomes us into that place of fellowship with my kids. Is there anything that has worse hygiene than toddlers? They're disgusting. Like, I don't know what's happened, but they've both lost their minds. In our backyard, we've got this table. It's a sand table. That's like the new millennial parent thing to do is we don't do sand pits, we do sand tables. And they're elevated, and they've got flowing things and all this, cool stuff. And so we've got this sand table. And if you have a sand table, you have to have water, right? So now we've got water, and we've got sand, and then there's this little low spot in my yard, so the water flows over, and the water runs in the low spot, and then we get mud, right? So we've got mud, we've got sand, we've got water, and it's not a party without popsicles. So then we have popsicles everywhere. So my kids play for hours in sand, in mud, in water, covered in popsicle. Because what happens when you give a toddler a popsicle? They take 3 licks and then it melts all over their entire body. Sticky, nasty, dirty mess. I literally saw one of my children, I won't tell you which one, that was covered in sand, covered in mud, covered in popsicles, soaking wet, take their finger and go like this, look, and then go like this, and then start going, and I'm like, you just stuck sand in your nose and in your mouth. You're disgusting. Like, what are you doing? Serves you right. You're going to eat a booger filled with sand and mud. That's what's going to happen. So I'm like, okay, we got to clean these kids up. They're a mess. So we take them inside, and I'm telling my son, I'm like, stand there and wait. Don't you move, you dirty little 3-year-old, And I put my daughter in the bathtub, and I'm rinsing her off, and he says, Daddy, I want to wrestle in the bed. He takes off from my bed. I'm like, no, sir. No, you will. And I catch him, I grab him, and I'm like, and he's like, Daddy, I just want to wrestle with you. It's our favorite thing to do, right? Our bed is like our WWE ring, and we wrestle and fight, and I throw him on. And he's like, Daddy, all I want to do is wrestle with you. And I said, you are too disgustingly dirty to wrestle with me in our bed. Get in here. I take him, I put him in the shower, I cover him with this shampoo, and I get the nozzle, and I start spraying him, and I am literally watching. It's disgusting. You watch the drain, and there is so much dirt and sand and popsicle and mud. It is like running off of him. Some of you think, man, they're terrible parents. They let their kids play in that all day. We're working on it. And so it's just stuff everywhere, right? It's so disgusting. And so I'm holding the water until I reach the place where I look down and I don't see it anymore. And it's all ran off of it, and the soap is taking it off. And then finally the water is pure, and so I take him out of the shower, and I dry him off, and he says to me, Daddy, can we wrestle now? And I said, yeah, and I threw him off the ropes, and I caught him, I threw him over, suplexed him, bam, right onto the bed, and he and I, we started wrestling. But you realize, right, he was too dirty in the first place to join me in the place that he wanted to join me. He had to be cleansed first before he could have fellowship with me in the area he wanted to enjoy fellowship. You've got to see the blood of Jesus, the shower of the blood of Jesus that is running over you, washing you clean until everything has been ran off of you. And in that moment, he welcomes you into his presence to join the journey of freedom, and he suplexes you into the kingdom, or however you want to see it, right? But you have to have this cleansing to join in the journey of freedom. Now we finish. Good, right? Hebrews 11:29. It was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea, and as though they were on dry ground. Love that. Bottom of a river, bottom of a sea. What do you expect? Mushy, nasty, not with God. When he does a miracle, he does it all the way. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they all drowned. Listen to the words of Moses right before they went. Exodus 14:13-14. It says, but Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Don't fear. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. Verse 14, the Lord himself will fight for you. On the journey of freedom, cleansed by the blood, the Lord is fighting for you. He is in your corner. He is behind you. He's with you all the way. Just stay calm. Started with the faith to take a step. Started with the faith to take a step into what was a parted sea, wondering, is the water going to collapse on us? Pharaoh's closing in. What do we do now? And it started with a step. Cleansed by the blood, taking the step into freedom. I have a really good friend who was a really big guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4", and he's really overweight. And he said he was watching a video. He was watching the TV show The Biggest Loser. That'll do it, right? And so he's watching The Biggest Loser, and he said while he was watching that, he said to himself, I can do that. I can do that. And so he goes out to his driveway, and he said he started taking a walk. He said, I'm going to go for a walk. And he walked to the end of his driveway. He said he's out of breath. He stopped at the end of his driveway, paused for a minute, walked back up his driveway. He said, I'm doing it again tomorrow. He does it again tomorrow. Walks to the end of his driveway. He walks back, and then he said, you know what? I bet I can make it to my neighbor's driveway. So then he walked to his neighbor's driveway and came back. And then he walked down to the stop sign, and he came back. And then he walked around the neighborhood, and he came back. And then he said, I bet you I could run to the end of my driveway and back. And he ran to the end of his driveway and back. And then he said, I bet I could run to the stop sign and back. And he ran to the stop sign and back. And so he started doing this years ago, and he just finished his 11th marathon, right? So, yeah. I'm congratulating him, and I'm saying, dude, awesome job. You are the man running marathons. And he said something to me that I thought was so good. He said, man, I am not the man who started running marathons. He said, I don't want to be the big guy that started running marathons, because when I say to someone like me, hey, I used to be where you're at and now I'm running 26.2 miles, and they're like, yeah, not it. See you later. I'm checked out. That's not me. He said, I'm not the big guy who ran 11 marathons. He said, I'm the big guy that decided to take a step. I'm the big guy that said, I'm going to take a step to the end of my driveway. I'm the big guy that said, I'm going to take a step to the stop sign. I'm the big guy that said, I'm going to take a step around my neighborhood. And this is what happened. If you start taking a step in the direction of freedom, if you will say, I am cleansed by the blood, I am worthy of being in fellowship with my Father, and I am taking a step towards freedom today, God will meet you there if you will just be calm, and He will fight for you, and He will take you to greater levels of freedom than you ever imagined.
Everybody, thanks again for joining us. We believe God has something great for your life, and we hope this message encouraged you to take the next step in your faith. Have a great week.